You wake before the sun, far earlier than any sane body would choose, especially the one belonging to the humblest servant in the most extravagant palace east of the Tiber. While you squint at the first pale streaks of dawn, allow me this reminder for the invisible audience hovering over your shoulder. Tap that like button and subscribe to our little feeder of history. Only if you truly enjoy the twists I'm bending into these words. And drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always a marvel to see night owls from every corner of the world gathering to drift off together beneath the rustle of ancient intrigue. Now dim the lights. Let a fan hum softly in the background, and we'll slip deeper into the story. Salt, slick air, heavy with the fish market tang of the docks, fills your nostrils. You've barely rubbed sleep from your eyes when the guard ibises begin their hideous barking. Crooked-beaked kleptomaniacs hired by some courtly zoologist to protect pomegranate groves by screaming at sunrise. Your bamboo mat sits inside the perfumery storeroom. Last night, you knocked over a jar of sandalwood oil, so a ghostly patch now steams in the corner, like a wooden soul escaping. At least, that pleasant haze overpowers the real morning odor, the sour liquid used to soak hunks of Maurice cheese for Caesar's beloved mice. Yes, Caesar is still in Rome, but his vermin have arrived ahead of him. This palace always prepares for the worst, including Roman taste buds. Today's chief mission: donkey milk. Not a mere bucket or two, but an entire tub in which the state poets insist a woman bathes her flesh so she may smell of lotus at dawn and seduce the gods. You privately suspect it's just compensation for the palace sewer that's been gurgling under the library since Ptolemy II. In the inner courtyard, dawn looks gorgeous from afar. Up close, its split ends are slaves stoking furnaces for hot water. While they scurry, you pass the donkey pen. A thin skin of curd already floats on the fresh milk, tasting faintly of grass and yesterday's breeding. You skim it off with a silk spoon, not because the queen disdains cream, but because Basil is the palace fat cat, convinced he's Bastet reborn, though he more resembles a sack of dates. He pads by with the gaze of a banker. How many stolen skim-offs today, child? You fill his porcelain saucer. He purrs a curse that roughly translates, "May sacred cobras dine upon your enemies." Corridors reek of frankincense, urine, and damp cornelian wood. In alcoves, statues of old Ptolemies, 3rd through 7th, snooze, their identical chins waiting for their noses to drop off in unison. You salute Ptolemy V with a fingertip to the brow, so he doesn't slip on your fate. Under Cleopatra's bedroom ceiling, the goddess Newt is painted across the vault. If she could speak, she'd lament being glued there, watching servants polish golden spittoons. You ease open the door. The chamber smells of roses and triumph of the men. A Syrian wardrobe master with a trunk-shaped earring smooths silk sheets. The queen still sleeps, hair tossed like black serpents, while real serpents nap in a basket at her feet. She keeps symbolism close in case an unexpected Roman guest arrives. You set the milk tub into the marble bath. The water is lukewarm. 2 elephantine maids puff at coals so it doesn't boil. The palace is tomb quiet until a shaggy musician strikes a 4-string kithara in the hall and flat notes the whole wing. At last, Cleopatra opens her eyes, glimmering with the sort of metaphor that orders treasurers executed before breakfast. Thing. Her gaze slides past you, checking you haven't turned into Rome itself. Water? Parted warmer than Moses could manage? Splendid. She speaks in parables, even before coffee. You offer your hand. He descends into the milk with the dignity of an author who's published 12 treatises on bathing. From the side, she looks like a white cat diving into a jar of honey. The frothy rim of the tub resembles tiny sarcophagi, little bubble crypts where mermaid pharaohs drowned in previous dreams. You muse that this bath could be a cleaner rehearsal for the Nile, minus the crocodiles that eat delinquent taxpayers. She squints against the steam. You slide her a silver cup of wine laced with pomegranate juice. Half alcohol for courage, half for forgetting you live in times when linen is ironed with sizzling beefsteaks because someone hasn't invented a real iron. Charita, she coos, sweet as a woman who yesterday ordered 3 accountants beheaded. Did you hear the harbor is clogged with Roman triremes? You nod. In truth, the harbor is jammed with everything. Warships, merchants, and the bodies of harbor guards who toppled off the pier after sampling new wine from Kos. Cleopatra sips. Today we practice diplomacy and perfume. Let Caesar experience Egypt with his nose first. The heart is always late. You head to the kitchens, which smell of cumin and catastrophe. Cooks whirl around vats of lentils. Nicanor, a mustachioed man bald from 13 years of stress, explains that this year's garum, rotted fish sauce, is particularly mature. You joke that mature means it acknowledges its own unfitness and leaps off the plate. Nicanor roars with laughter, then plunges a hand into the barrel to be sure the sauce hasn't escaped. The stench suggests Poseidon overslept in his armor. Returning, you find Cleopatra in a gauzy robe, a black curl posed like an eagle on a bank logo. She inhales. Do you smell it? Fishy? The Romans will think Venus herself is stepping from a shell. You refrain from noting that Venus would suffocate exiting this shell. Today I receive Caesar in the Golden Hall. You will sprinkle the colonnade with rosewater. Don't drown the columns. They are not politicians. You memorize the rule. Columns don't drown in policy. And recall Rosewater's treachery. Pour too much, and the scent is so cloying, a cobra will grin and decide it's an air freshener. You imagine dousing every slab of marble so completely that Romans suspect you plan to drown them literally. The war would end when soldiers gulp petals, then water. The queen rises, milk cascading over her shoulders, leaving white cartography on her skin. She wraps herself in linen. You muse that linen endures a ruler's daily irritation better than any underpaid seamstress. Then, miracle of timing, a conch horn blares from the port. Someone shouts that the lead trireme bears a statue of Caesar taller than a senator's self-regard. Cleopatra clicks her tongue. A great man with great ornaments. Let us see whether he can refrain from boning the library this time. You recall last year's evacuation of scrolls to the Pharaoh's lighthouse, in case someone torches knowledge again. Scrolls are lighter than marble, people say. You know that when you're a gray servant, anything is lighter than your responsibility. On your way to the storerooms for Rosewater, you stumble over a sheet of parchment dropped in haste. Your heart, still yours, not yet state property, somersaults. Today something immense might begin, or end, or both, if history decides on a joke. You fold the letter into your tunic, maybe to sell it to a librarian when you finally own a dawn of your own. And so the chapter closes, and you, like any respectable handmaiden, now smell of roses, sour milk, and politics poised on the brink of grand fermentation. You hoist the rolled Persian carpet onto your shoulder, wondering for the 1,000th time why diplomacy must weigh as much as a marble sarcophagus. The rug smells of cedar, mothballs, and the faint panic of the warehouse slaves who spent all night picking beetles out of its knots. Your task is simple in theory. Smuggle Cleopatra into Caesar's presence like an exotic gift wrap. Let her unfurl at the conqueror's feet and watch his famously strategic jaw hit the tiles. Symbol. Except the carpet is 15 meters long, damp from the harbor fog, and currently trying to eat your tunic with its bronze thread tassels. You drag the behemoth down a colonnade, slick with yesterday's rosewater. Columns flash by, limestone sentries sweating perfume. Ahead waits the queen, already barefoot on a velvet cushion. Arms crossed, expression half goddess, half bored cat. She inspects the carpet the way a lioness inspects a zookeeper, calculating whether to bother devouring him after the show. "Fold me tight," she says, voice honey over steel. No gaps. I want him surprised, not scandalized. You nod, reminding yourself this woman speaks 9 languages fluently and swears in 12. Best to avoid becoming language number 13. Two Nubian guards heave the far end while you brace the near. You kneel, spread the first layer on the marble, and Cleopatra steps onto the fabric as though boarding a pleasure barge. Milk-soft skin meets scratchy wool. She winces, then raises a brow. Continue. You tuck one edge over her ankles, apologizing to every deity of lumbar discs. The carpet exhales mothball dust that instantly lodges in your throat. You wonder if there is a patron saint of servants choking on diplomatic upholstery. Roll, tug, tighten. Cleopatra's perfume, myrrh and victory, mingles with the carpet's damp must. Overboop! Halfway through, she whispers, "If I suffocate, be sure to tell Caesar it was for the glory of Rome. He loves irony." You manage a strangled laugh, then cinch another fold. At last, she is a silken cylinder, regal dignity compressed into a tapestry of dancing meads. The guards lash a crimson ribbon around the bundle. Decorative, yes, but mostly to stop the queen from unspooling on a bump and flattening a eunuch. You test the weight. Heavier than secrets, lighter than treason. A good compromise. A procession forms, musicians with double flutes, scribes clutching parchments, you at the head, carpet tilting precariously like an overstuffed papyrus scroll. The hallway seems twice as long today, echoing with your strange grunt. Every few steps the carpet shifts, a reminder that Cleopatra is inside, possibly composing witty openings or simply napping. Royalty can multitask. At the Golden Hall doors, two Roman sentries stand gawking. Bronze helmets, square jaws, the smell of wet iron. They eye the rug with suspicion, learned from decades of Trojan myths. You plaster on your most innocent smile. "Gift for Caesar," you announce in clumsy Latin. "Extremely fragile. Do not poke." One sentry prods the edge anyway. From inside issues a muffled but unmistakable hiss. He yanks back his spear. You thank all benevolent serpents for their impeccable timing. The doors swing open. Inside, Caesar lounges on a gilded couch, toga draped as if sculpted by smokiness itself. Around him, marble generals strike heroic poses, oblivious to the fact they're just chairs with abs. Torches flicker. Their smoke scribbles epics that no one will read. Caesar's gaze pins you like a butterfly, equal parts curiosity and conquest. For one irrational moment, you fear the queen has actually suffocated, that you will unroll a corpse and spark an international incident starring you as the opening act on a pike. You tug the ribbon. The carpet loosens. A swirl of patterned wool spirals across the floor, revealing a foot painted with gold leaf. An ankle bracelet shaped like a sphinx. Then, knees, hips, torso, all emerging in hypnotic slow motion. Cleopatra rises from her textile chrysalis, hair flawless, eyes alight with calculations. The room inhales. "Salve, Gaius Julius," she purrs. "I heard Rome enjoyed surprises." Caesar's expression warps. Equal parts admiration and the dawning realization that he will never, ever top this entrance. He recovers with a thin smile. Egypt never fails to instruct Rome in spectacle. Translation: well played. My ego hurts. Servants scuttle to fetch cushions. Cleopatra sits beside him, as though the couch were pre-warmed, but you retreat to the shadow of a pillar, where the conversation drifts like incense. Alliances, grain shipments, his upcoming triumph. She flatters his legions. He compares the Nile's fertility to Roman virtue, which makes her laugh softly, as if virtue were an amusing rumor. But there are mishaps. Only servants notice. The damp carpet has begun to mildew under the torches, releasing a smell reminiscent of drowned goat. The nearest Roman senator pinches his nose, suspecting Egyptian sabotage. You snatch a vial of cinnamon oil from a passing tray and drizzle it over the fibers, praying spice can exorcise fungus. It mingles with the goat note into an aroma best described as holiday at the butcher's. Close enough. A page boy trips on the loosened fringe, sprawls at Caesar's sandaled feet, scattering papyrus scrolls like frightened geese. Caesar scowls. Cleopatra bursts into laughter that rings like polished bronze. You seize the moment to retrieve the scrolls, tucking the most interesting, an itemized bill for Roman legion expenses, into your sleeve. Information, after all, is lighter than carpets and often more valuable. Yeah, what a way to start the night. The meeting stretches. Wine flows, Greek, strong, tinted with crushed violets. Cleopatra sips elegantly. Caesar gulps like a dehydrated gladiator. His cheeks flush Roman standard crimson. He leans closer with each anecdote. Voice slipping into conspiracy, she counters with stories of Nile floods and lunar omens, sentences coiling around his ambitions like silken ropes. You spot it first. A bead of sweat rolling down Caesar's temple. The subtle sway of his shoulders. The man who marched across Gaul is seasick on Egyptian charisma. Cleopatra notices, smiles a crocodile smile, dabs his brow with her veil as though he were a feverish child. He looks ready to rename the month of July again in her honor. Then thunder rattles the windows. No storm, just artillery practice from Roman ships showing off in the harbor. The hall's marble rings like a giant bell. Plaster dust drifts from the ceiling frescoes. A torch gutters and spits, showering sparks onto the edge of the discarded carpet. You leap, stamping the ember before it can bloom. Your sandal sole sizzles. The senator with the tender nose squeals. Cleopatra and Caesar barely glance over, too busy inventing empire. When the audience finally ends, Caesar rises, radiating that peculiar glow of a man both victorious and surrendered. He bows, not deeply, but enough for every Roman in the room to memorize. Cleopatra inclines her head less than a degree. Worlds tilt. Caesar departs amid trumpet blasts. The queen turns to you. Fetch fresh sandals. These floors reek of Roman dust. She doesn't mention the carpet, now ruined, moldy, singed, and priceless. Nor does she ask if you still have a spine after carrying half of Anatolia on one shoulder. Yet, as you drag the smoking rug toward a servant's exit, you catch her whisper to a scribe, "Send for the astronomers. I wish to know how many stars changed course today." You smile, despite the ache in every bone. Stars, carpets, servants, all must realign when Cleopatra spins her thread. Outside, the afternoon sun scalds the portico. You shake moth dust from your hair, cough up cedar, and think, tomorrow you might be ordered to wrap Rome itself in tapestry. Stranger things have happened, and they usually start with a queen saying, "Fold me tight." The banquet begins long before anyone dares to eat. You are in the kitchens at dawn again, coaxing a cauldron of lentils that looks suspiciously like mortar. When the head cook declares them al dente enough to stun a legionary, you ladle the sludge into amphorae painted with frolicking satyrs, an optimistic touch that fools no one, least of all your nose. The real star of the menu is garum, a sauce of rotted fish viscera so pungent it could raise the dead, though you suspect even mummies would slam their sarcophagi shut at the first whiff. By mid-morning, the Golden Hall has been transformed into a temple of excess. Linen drapes spill from the ceiling like surrendered flags, and bronze braziers belch cinnamon smoke to mask the rising tide of garum fumes. Sleep, listener, at perfect rest. You glide between pillars, carrying trays of pickled quail eggs that jiggle in time with your heartbeat. Somewhere behind you, a eunuch retches discreetly into a potted palm. The palm, having heard worse, bears it with stoic fronds. Caesar arrives immersed, armor exchanged for a toga stiff with embroidery. He greets Cleopatra with that conquering smile, half marble, half wolf, and begins an impromptu lecture. You are posted behind his couch, fanning him with ostrich feathers carved from cedar. Each time he gestures to illustrate water flow, you must dodge the arc of his hand or risk a consul's backhand. Cleopatra listens, chin propped on a jeweled fist, nodding as though aqueducts are the stuff of poetry rather than plumbing. Her eyes, however, keep darting toward the kitchen doors where the garum waits, like an uninvited oracle. When the first platters march out, the room's temperature rises by several degrees, partly from torches, partly from collective dread. You set a bowl of lentils before a Roman senator, whose teeth are already stained purple from breakfast wine. He offers you a coin's worth of a smile, then drowns the lentils in garum so enthusiastically you consider calling the harbor guards to report a toxic spill. Cleopatra lifts her cup. To Rome, whose engineers teach rivers obedience. Caesar bows his head in acknowledgement, missing the way her mouth twitches at the word obedience. You circulate with a silver pitcher of honeyed water, doling out sips like antidote. Each Roman you pass reeks of ambition and anchovy. Halfway through the feast, disaster takes the shape of a single bedbug. It skitters across the brocade cushion behind Caesar, bold as any barbarian. You alone spot it. After all, it was you who dusted the guest couches with crushed mint leaves at dawn, a trick learned from an itinerant apothecary who swore insects hate the smell of fresh debt. Evidently, this bug is a fiscal conservative. It scampers toward Caesar's collar. You flick it away with the feather fan, praying the gesture looks decorative rather than homicidal. The bug lands in a bowl of olives and meets a briny end, becoming the evening's only casualty who deserved it. Caesar, oblivious, extols the sewage-cleansing virtues of the Cloaca Maxima. Cleopatra counters with a detailed description of the Nile's annual flood, which politely deposits fertile silt instead of raw effluent. You almost applaud. The senators shift on their cushions, unsure whether they have been praised or insulted. One chooses both and belches diplomatically into his napkin. Dessert arrives. Figs stuffed with pistachios and tiny cubes of salted cheese. You arrange the platter on the low table, but your eyes are on the queen's signet ring, a coiled asp cast in gold. When the torchlight hits it, the snake looks alive, poised to strike. Boomer says she keeps real vipers in a silver box for special occasions. You wonder what qualifies as special. Victory? A sudden crash interrupts your thoughts. A serving girl has slipped on a slick of spilled garum, and the amphora she carried shatters, baptizing the marble floor in fermented fish guts. The stench detonates. Senators gag. A Roman tribune curses Neptune. And Caesar's eyes water so fiercely you fear he'll blame Egypt for inventing his tear ducts. Cleopatra rises, expression serene, and murmurs, "It seems Rome's appetite has met its wave." Laughter ripples from the Egyptian side of the room. The Romans choose not to notice. You seize a bucket of rosewater and douse the fishy flood, creating a new perfume, best described as sea burial in springtime. While you mop, Cleopatra signals the musicians. Flutes and sistrums drown the protests of offended nostrils. Caesar dabs his eyes, laughs, and resumes discoursing on hydraulic pressure as though nothing has happened, which is the privilege of men who conquer continents instead of kitchens. At dusk, the banquet winds down. Senators recline in stupors of wine and salted protein. Caesar rises to depart, but Cleopatra detains him with a hand on his forearm. The gesture soft as silk, yet strong as treaty parchment. She invites him to tour the lighthouse at dawn. He agrees, intoxicated more by her smile than by the 11 cups of Falernian he downed. They part at the doorway. His footsteps echo like distant drums. You'll never believe it. I got accepted into the art program. But I am nervous about moving so far away from home. It hurts to think about leaving everyone behind. But I do feel so alive when I create. I just know this is what I'm meant to do. You are left with the wreckage. Greasy platters, overturned goblets, and a carpet that now smells of fish apocalypse, despite your cinnamon heroics. As servants clear tables, you collect abandoned napkins to patch the drafty windows in your quarters. Linen is linen, whether wiped across a senator's chin or stuffed against a desert night breeze. Before leaving the hall, you notice the olive bowl where the heroic dead bug drowned. It bobs lifeless between green spheres. You lift it in salute. Ave, little legionary. You whisper. You fell so Rome might itch another day. Then you swallow the last olive, crunching accidental protein, and decide that conquest, like supper, is often seasoned with things best left unidentified. In the silence that follows, you feel the palace breathe, stones cooling, schemes fermenting. Tomorrow will bring new lectures, new spills, perhaps new serpents loose from silver boxes. But tonight you crawl onto your bamboo mat, smelling of garum and glory, certain that every empire, Roman, Egyptian, or insect, rises and falls by what it chooses to stomach. The night after the banquet, you barely sleep. You spend the dark hours stuffing silk cushions into wicker trunks, counting amphorae of wine, and chasing the runaway ibis that refuses to join the voyage. Apparently, even birds have boundaries. By the time a charcoal-colored dawn oozes over the palace roof tiles, your eyelids feel weighted with amphora stoppers. But Cleopatra's whisper cracks through the courtyard like a starting pistol. Bring the gold boat to the eastern quay. So you are here, shivering on the dock, watching servants polish a river barge until it glows like a fresh coin in a tax collector's dream. The hull is overlaid with hammered electrum. At sunrise, it will blind half of Lower Egypt, and the other will write songs about the glare. 2 masts carry purple sails the size of ambition. Between them stands a pavilion of cedar, plated in thin sheets of gold leaf, its lattice doors carved with papyrus and winged suns. Portable divinity on water. While oarsmen load supplies, you inspect the orchestra. A dozen flute players hired for the trip, each wearing robes too long for deck work. One sneezes and snaps his reed mouthpiece in half. Another confesses he cannot swim. You quietly calculate how many musicians the Nile can claim before Cleopatra notices the melody thinning. She arrives in a litter, smelling of lotus and last night's triumph, cloaked in linen so fine that the dawn light passes through and paints hieroglyphs across her skin. Julius Caesar, still drunk on yesterday's flattery, waves from the quay like an overeager lighthouse. He is not invited aboard. Cleopatra promised him a private tour later, once the river has arranged her hair to perfection. He masks disappointment beneath statesmanly nods, but you can hear his ego kink like a dented shield. Raking creaks. Ropes splash. You hurry inside the pavilion to set her breakfast. Dates, goat cheese, and wine watered just enough to remind a queen she is mortal. Outside, sailors chant to tine the oars. The boat pulls away, slicing the river surface cleanly, as though the Nile has been waiting centuries for this particular cut. Wind fills the sails. Music begins, sort of. An flutist starts a complex riff from Memory of Thebes. But the second flutist is still swabbing spit, so the tune collapses into a wheeze that resembles a dying pelican. Cleopatra leans on the rail, smiling as if the discord were avant-garde. You station yourself at her elbow, prepared to explain that art sometimes imitates drowning. Emphasis, pre-Zodi rate of 70%. Along the children race the boat, kicking dust, shrieking Isis on water. A priest waves incense so vigorously, he stumbles into an irrigation ditch. You record every expression. Awesome, resentful, hungry. Cleopatra says softly, "A queen must be a mirror. Let them see what they crave." You nod, ignoring the part of the crowd that plainly craves lunch more than majesty. Mid-morning heat spreads its damp hand over everything. The gold deck becomes an accidental griddle. Musicians hop from foot to foot between measures. You distribute palm-woven sandals, salvaged from a storeroom labeled "Campaigns Unsuccessful," proving at last that failure has footwear benefits. The flutists raise a ragged hymn to Sobek, hoping the crocodile god will keep his real-life protégés at a respectful distance. Of course, the Nile is a gossip. Within an hour, a scaly head surfaces near the port side. Eyes level, grin prehistoric. Sailors whisper curses. Cleopatra claps once. Two soldiers roll jars of rancid oil across the deck and dump them overboard. Lunch is served on low bronze tables. Roast duck, figs, and a frightening new sauce the cook claims will honor the river's fragrance. It honors nothing but chemical warfare. You discreetly knock the bowl over the rail, where it sizzles on the oily water like acid on parchment. Cleopatra watches, amused. Even the Nile must swallow its pride, she says. Then offers you the crispiest fig in thanks for your domestic sabotage. Afternoon drags. The musicians discover that playing flutes continuously in upper Nile humidity produces a sound like mating locusts. Cleopatra orders a rest. Gratitude echoes from every sweaty robe. You fetch a parasol lined with dyed ostrich feathers. She sits beneath it reading a scroll of Homer, pausing occasionally to translate a line into Egyptian for your benefit. Each translation grows more sarcastic. Here Achilles broods, she mutters. Imagine brooding when you could be negotiating grain prices. Clouds gather, strange in this season. A gust slaps the sails sideways. The mast yawns. You race across the deck, tightening ropes, while raindrops the size of pearls pelt the electrum, carving temporary scars. One musician slips, his flute skittering into the Nile like a silver fish. He dives after it, forgetting he can't swim. One musician slips, his flute skittering into the Nile like a silver fish. He dives after it, forgetting he can't swim. One musician slips, his flute skittering into the Nile like a silver fish. He dives after it, forgetting he can't swim. Two sailors haul him out by his braid, minus the instrument and most of his dignity. Cleopatra laughs, a low ripple. There goes the best note he ever played. The storm retreats as suddenly as it came, leaving the sky washed and brilliant. Steam hisses off gold panoff. Crewmen wipe decks with coat hair brushes. The wet bristles paint crescent moons on the shining surface. The flutists attempt one final piece, slower, mournful. This time, the melody holds, perhaps because exhaustion has simplified ambition. Cleopatra closes her eyes. You feel the rhythm settle over the deck like a quilt, and for a fleeting breath, the entire crew inhales in unison, as if the boat itself has lumps. Anchor drops near a palm grove. Torches stud the shore, reflections dancing across black water. Tents are pitched for sailors. Cleopatra will sleep on board, lulled by the lap of the river against gold. Your final duty: inspect the pavilion for insects, diplomats, and ghosts. In the curtained chamber, you find only a single lotus petal stuck to the silk mattress. You pocket it, superstition dictating that tomorrow's fortune can be folded and carried. Outside, frogs begin their nocturnal symposium. You sit on the bow, feet dangling inches above murky darkness. Somewhere downstream, Caesar paces a marble balcony, rehearsing brilliant remarks for a queen who converses with crocodiles. Upstream lies Thebes, riddled with tombs that swear memory matters. Between those two worlds, you drift, servant to a woman who treats history like clay and expects you to bring water for the shaping. A breeze lifts. The gold hull whispers. You think of the city lights behind you, the endless sand ahead, and the river beneath. Patient, amused, keeping everyone's secrets in slow-moving ink. Sleep tugs at your spine. You surrender, certain the Nile will remember your weight, if not your name. And that tomorrow's chapter will open with its own grin and a brand new blister for the record. You wake to riots of birdsong and the muffled groans of carpenters hammering a new nursery wing onto the palace. Nothing announces impending royalty like construction at dawn. Cleopatra is 7 months pregnant, swollen with a future named Caesarean. And every wall must apparently be moved 2 cubits to the left so the child can hear the sea in stereo. You are summoned before sunrise to fetch frankincense compresses, honey-soaked figs, and a Greek physician who insists on wearing his laurel wreath indoors because medical authority, like mildew, thrives in damp corners. The queen reclines on a mountain of silk pillows, belly rising like a full moon over a desert horizon. Her ankles resemble silver bracelets stuffed with bread dough, yet her eyes glitter with battle tactics. She greets you by comparing childbirth to a siege. Position the catapults correctly, and the gates will open on their own. You decide not to question whether you are artillery or ammunition. Morning duty involves wafting incense toward her abdomen in slow circles, as if smoking out troublesome spirits. Yeah. The physician rattles off theories about humors, while Cleopatra corrects his Latin declensions between contractions that are only practice skirmishes, but leave her breathless and irritable. You hold a bronze mirror so she can evaluate her complexion. She pronounces herself luminous enough to blind jealous senators. The physician prescribes bed rest. She orders a meeting with tax officials instead. By midday, the palace smells of myrrh, lavender, and mild terror. Courtiers tiptoe, servants tip faster. You supervise the kitchen staff, preparing pregnancy food. A stew of lentils, dates, and crushed almonds, simmered until the whole pot resembles diplomacy gone mushy. After lunch, she makes you read aloud Caesar's last letter, a confident scroll predicting the birth will cement his alliance with Egypt. His handwriting slants like a swaggering soldier. His metaphors drip with paternal pride. Cleopatra chuckles at the line promising to deliver Roman midwives. If Rome's surgeons could birth a god, they would have carved one from marble already, she says. Besides, I prefer blades stay sheathed today. You note the irony that a future called Caesarean will exit by methods predating the Caesarean. Afternoon tempers the heat, but not the queen's restlessness. She insists on touring the nursery in progress. Workers freeze as she waddles between scaffold boards, surveying murals of Horace and Fortuna shaking hands over a cradle. One artist has painted the baby's face suspiciously like Caesar's. Another depicts the infant wearing a double crown. Cleopatra orders both retouched. Let the boy choose whose nose to inherit. You nod, secretly hoping he picks one less liable to statue breakage. Twilight brings the first real contractions. Sharp, rolling waves that make diplomatic metaphors useless. The midwife cadre assembles. 2 Nubian matrons, an Alexandrian herbalist, and the Greek physician, who immediately argues with everyone about uterus angles. Cleopatra silences him with a look that could shear bronze. You are appointed official water-bearer, towel swapper, and morale officer. Labor stretches into night. Torches hiss. The palace seems to hold its breath, as if the Nile itself has diverted to wait outside the birthing chamber. Cleopatra alternates between regal calm and curses that would scorch. She squeezes your hand with vice-like determination. You suspect your bones will remember this grip longer than history remembers your name. Near midnight, the physician suggests sotto voce, an experimental incision used once in a cattle emergency. The midwives hiss like pets. Cleopatra growls, "No steel. I deliver kings, not butchered calves." You envision future scholars puzzling over why the procedure named after Caesar came decades too late to rescue his own bloodline. And you hope the irony amuses them. The final push arrives with a scream fierce enough to rattle scarabs in the courtyard mosaics. Then a gush, a cough, a squalling protest against the indignity of existence. The midwife raises a wrinkled bundle, slick with vernix and destiny. Cleopatra collapses back, triumphant and trembling. "My little son," she whispers. You hand her a damp cloth. She wipes the infant's brow, which is still forming but already looks inclined to command. The cord is tied with thread spun from the queen's own hair, an omen of unbreakable lineage. You light a small clay lamp and pass it thrice over mother and child, an old Macedonian ritual stolen from your grandmother. Just the Greek physician sniffs but says nothing. Even scholarship retreats before the smell of newborn sovereignty. Outside, trumpets blare. Rumor outruns midwives. Alexandria knows and air breathes before the placenta leaves the room. Grain merchants like fireworks. Philosophers toast diluted wine. Cats yowl hymns more pagan than the priests would allow. You wrap Caesarion in linen embroidered with lotus petals and gilded thread. Though he promptly spits up, everyone laughs, except the accountant calculating what infant vomit does to state assets. Dawn's first light filters through alabaster windows. Cleopatra, pale yet glowing in triumph, cradles the sleeping boy and orders a proclamation. Free bread for a week, debt forgiveness for veterans, and fresh paint for the lighthouse, because a new star guides our harbor. You realize she is already weaponizing birth weight. As the chamber clears, She beckons you closer. History honors heroes, she murmurs. But bedtime stories remember the ones who held the basin. She presses a tiny jade scarab into your palm, a symbol of rebirth. Keep it. When the world shifts, you need luck more than morals. You leave the room exhausted, scarab pulsing warmth against your skin. In the corridor, a scribe is chiseling the birth announcement onto a limestone tablet. He misspells Caesarean twice. You correct him, then drift toward the kitchens where celebratory honey cakes bake. The palace echoes with lullabies and hammers. New walls already rising to cradle tomorrow's sovereign. You fall onto your bamboo mat at last, smelling of smoke, sweat, and vernix, ears ringing with newborn wails that sound suspiciously like the opening notes of empire. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, Rome stirs, calculating how to claim what Egypt has just delivered. But tonight, amid torchlight and ginger-spiced air, you let the scarab rest on your chest and trust that even empires must crawl before they conquer. You are sorting lavender sachets in the treasury corridor when a breathless courier skids across the tiles, scattering cedar shavings like panic confetti. He thrusts a wax-sealed tablet at you. It bears the Roman eagle cracked straight down the beak. You break habit and read it before the steward can snatch it away. The message is 5 words, each one a hammer blow. Gaius Julius dead, Ides of March. A single smear of dried blood punctuates the signature, as though Rome itself cut its finger sealing the news. For 3 heartbeats, the palace stands unnaturally still, caught between gasp and scream. Then, chaos stampedes the corridors. Senators, translators, bawling contradictory orders. Eunuchs sprinting with bolt cutters to secure every door. Librarians bundling scrolls that might suddenly become seditious. Someone knocks over a jar of rose oil. The marble smells like a corpse in a perfume bath. You find Cleopatra in the solar, gazing at a bronze globe that now feels more like a countdown timer. Her face is carved calm, but the knuckles clutching the globe's axis shine white. Rome has beheaded itself, she says, voice so level you hear the minute crack of composure under. We must see whether the neck still twitches. She turns to you. Inventory the treasury tonight. Gold travels faster than armies. Twilight drags a red veil across. Official couriers gallop in, each bringing dire rumors. Antony rallying legions. Brutus issuing manifestos. A senate debating whether to canonize a knife. By sundown, the palace gates are barred, but whispers leak through keyholes like sewer gnats. You sharpen a lamp wick and prepare for nocturnal arithmetic. Near midnight, Cleopatra leads a skeleton crew, 2 spearmen, an accountant, and you, through a service passage thick with mouse droppings and forgotten dynasties of dust. Torches gutter, painting nervous hieroglyphs on plaster. The accountant carries 3 abacuses, because nothing says courage like redundant math. You carry a crowbar disguised as a parasol handle. Improvisation is the mother. The first storeroom yawns open, stacked floor to ceiling, with cedar chests branded with double snakes. You pry one lid. Ingots glint like frozen sunlight, each stamped with a falcon and a Roman numeral. The accountant starts counting aloud. Cleopatra silences him after the 8th with a gesture that might strangle a crocodile. "We are adding urgency, not columns," she hisses. You reseal the chest with fresh pitch that smells suspiciously like cheap wine. Because you used cheap wine. The treasury will taste hangover for weeks. Next chamber, grain tribute from Cyprus, still warm from harvest. Cleopatra orders half of it milled overnight and baked into loaves shaped like laurel wreaths. Bread propaganda for a city suddenly craving stability more than flavor. You mark the sacks with charcoal X's. The charcoal gets on your face. You look like an amateur mime of despair. In the armory, a spider web of silver cuirasses gleams. Cleopatra lifts one, tests its heft, then laughs. Too small for grief, too large for Caesarean. She flips it back on the rack. The clang sounds like a distant Senate vote. You secretly pocket a dagger with an ivory handle shaped like Fortuna. If luck refuses to follow orders, at least she can ride in your sleeve. Hours pass, measured by the accountant's suppressed whimpers, each time he sees a number without commas. Finally, you reach the wine vault, its air cool and conspiratorial. Cleopatra pauses at a barrel labeled Vintage of Conquest, 47 BCE, and taps the oak thoughtfully. Water turns to blood, but wine can turn to loyalty. She muses. She carves her sigil into the wood. A signature for future historians to misinterpret as drunken graffiti. A muffled crash reverberates above. A palace door forced, or merely a tapestry surrendering to gravity. The guards tense. You imagine assassins pouring through corridors like ants through a honey spill. Cleopatra merely straightens her spine. If Rome wants a widow, let it come courting, she murmurs. Then orders you all back to the residence before dawn reveals how quickly power sweats. Returning, you notice statues along the colonnade wear new shadows. Fear has redressed them overnight. In the nursery, Caesarean mules, oblivious that his father's name is now whispered with verbs like fell and stabbed. Cleopatra lifts him, presses her cheek to his. "Little son," she breathes. "Some clouds have silver linings, others have daggers." She lays him back, then fixes you with a stare sharp enough to trim lamp wicks. If letters from Rome arrive, they come to me first. Even condolences can carry venom. You stumble to your mat at gray-blue dawn, muscles buzzing from crate lifting, mind buzzing from everything else. The palace corridors still echo with hurried footfalls, and the accountant's shocked decimals. Somewhere a rooster crows, confused by political daylight savings. You clutch the ivory dagger and wonder if history's pages are turning faster than you can read them. Just before sleep crushes your skull, a final thought flickers rays. Rome may have lost its head, but Egypt just sharpened its claws. And in tomorrow's margins, your name might be penciled beside the word courier or collateral. Either way, keep the crowbar close. Doors rarely ask permission when empires collapse. You spend dawn sweeping wilted laurel leaves from yesterday's panic when a herald runs through the courtyard, shrieking that Mark Antony's fleet has been sighted. 100 prows cutting the sea like bronze teeth in search of a meal. By mid-morning, Alexandria's harbor is a carnival of trumpets, cymbals, and sailors shouting obscenities in 3 languages you recognize, and 2 you suspect were invented on the spot. Cleopatra instructs you to prepare the welcome of legends, which apparently means draping the quay in violet silk and telling the fishmongers not to gut anything within smelling distance of royalty. Antony's flagship glides in last, painted Tyrian purple, oars beating time to an on-deck orchestra so loud the gulls retreat inland. Unfortunately, his musicians have been drinking since Crete. The flutes to different hymns, the drums duel, and the cymbalist collapses mid-crash, nearly decapitating a standard bearer. You murmur that at least chaos is memorable. Cleopatra smirks. Legends require volume, not harmony. The gangplank thuds. Out strides Antony, half lion, half tavern brawl, breastplate flashing, reef crooked over curls already damp with sweat and wine. He spots Cleopatra waiting beneath an awning that makes the sun look second-rate. His grin widens as if he's found a new province to tax. You notice his sandals are mismatched. Greek left, Roman right. Symbolic or accidental. Either way, dangerous. Formal greetings melt faster than harbor ice. Antony tosses his helmet to a page, kisses Cleopatra's hand, then sweeps her up in a hug that rattles your teeth 2 body lengths away. She laughs, though her eyes measure the distance between his ego and the nearest exit. Introductions follow. Generals, poets, a philosopher who lost his scrolls gambling somewhere near Cyprus. You bow, catalog faces, calculate which might start a fistfight before dessert. A triumphal procession snakes toward the palace. Antony insists on walking, roaring jokes at bystanders, promising tax cuts to children and candy to taxpayers. Possibly reversed. Flower petals rain from balconies. Someone dumps a jug of rose water that splatters Antony's cloak, mixing perfume with sweat until he smells like a brothel after prayers. He shrugs off the cloak, flings it over your arms, and bellows for wine fountains high enough to drown sorrow and small senators. You relay the request to the steward, who gives you the look of a man asked to tame lightning with a ladle. In the grand courtyard, marble basins are hastily converted into vintage volcanoes. Slaves pump Falernian through bronze pipes. Crimson arcs leap skyward, fall in sparkling sheets that stain tunics and reputations indiscriminately. Antony wades in to his calves, scoops handfuls, drinks, roars approval, baptizes his lieutenants. Cleopatra watches from a balcony, expression equal parts amusement and cost-benefit analysis. You secure extra towels and pray the drainage system invented for ceremonial crocodiles can handle imperial hangovers. Banquet tables sprout like mushrooms across the hall. Platters of roast peacock, honeyed locusts, and eel pastries steam beside amphoraes stacked higher than some city walls. Antony seizes a chair, then decides chairs are for delicate spines and flops onto a bearskin rug instead. He orders you to sit nearby and relay the queen's every luscious syllable, claiming Egyptian accents improve when filtered through trembling servants. You comply, resisting the urge to translate everything into recipes for laxatives. Conversation flows like the wine, fast, heedless, staining everything. Antony boasts of battles, of chasing Parthians to the edge of sunrise, of out-drinking kings until they signed away provinces just to sleep. Cleopatra counters with tales of Nile floods, library fires narrowly averted, and the recent scaling of palace walls by tomcats seeking Bastet's blessing. Antony hoots, slaps the rug, offers tonight the bravest cat. Halfway through the third course, inventively titled Fish That Wanted to Be Birds, a servant trips, launching a tureen of garum across Antony's cuirass. The hall freezes. Garum drits like melted armor polish. It sent an insult in liquid form. You pounce with linen, dabbing scales of sauce, while Antony blinks at the ceiling, perhaps bargaining with lesser gods than usual. Then he erupts into laughter, so thunderous banners shake. Rome conquers noses before nations, he declares, scraping a fingerful of the stuff and licking it for emphasis. Cleopatra applauds, though you detect relief behind the fan she raises to hide a smile. Music begins. Lutes, tambourines, and a double aulos, wheezing out something that might once have been a love song before heavy drinking announced a coup. Antony demands a dance. Cleopatra descends the dais, slippers gliding through puddles of wine, extends her hand. They spiral in a messy, magnetic orbit, queen poised, general exuberant, each testing the other's gravity. Courtiers cheer, scribes scribble. You dodge spinning elbows while collecting discarded goblets, uncertain whether you are tidying or disarming the dance floor. Later, when stars flicker above incense haze, Antony grows sentimental. He asks to see the baby who carries Caesar's name. Cleopatra hesitates a heartbeat too long, then promises a viewing when dawn paints honesty across faces. Antony accepts, toasts Caesarion, toasts Caesar, forgets, and toasts them again. You notice his fingers drum a restless rhythm on the goblet. Ambition keeping time with grief. Near midnight, he stumbles toward guest chambers. Arm round your shoulders for balance. His armor weighs more than regret. He smells of battlefield campfires and expensive regret. In the corridor he pauses, squints at a fresco of Osiris judging souls, and mutters, "Hope the old god likes Romans." You reply that Osiris appreciates good stories. Antony winks, says, "Then we'll give him ethics," and kisses the god's painted feet for luck, leaving a smear of garum on eternity. You guide him to a suite perfumed with cedar and political caution. He collapses onto cushions, orders you to fetch more wine, then forgets and is snoring before you reach the door. You tiptoe out, closing the panel on rumbling thunder that may be his breathing or a prophecy warming up. Back in the hall, slaves mop wine for mosaics, while debating whether vinegar or prayer removes Falernian stains. You kneel, scrub garum from marble, wondering how many surfaces in Alexandria now testify to this day's alliances. Cleopatra appears, barefoot, holding her sandals as if weighing them against responsibility. "Does he sleep?" she asks. You nod. She exhales, the sound of sails furling after a storm. "Tomorrow," she says, "we steer his dreams toward Egypt." She steps into the shadowed corridor, leaving faint footprints of violet dust on the polished floor. You take a cloth, wipe them away, not sure whether you're erasing evidence or preparing space for new footprints yet to be chosen. Somewhere outside, Antony's fleet clangs rigging in the night breeze, an iron lullaby for a city that has forgotten silence. You return to your mat at the edge of dawn, ears ringing with laughter, lungs tart with wine vapor, hands reeking of fish sauce and strategy. Sleep sneaks up like a forgiving thief. Before it steals you completely, you picture two suns rising. One over Rome, uncertain and dimmer for its loss. One over Egypt, bright and brash, reflecting off the purple-painted hulls now anchored in Cleopatra's tide. You wonder which will burn longer, and whether servants get credit for polishing the mirrors that make kings believe in light. The sun lifts through a haze, the color of stale beer, and you are already knee-deep in papyrus dust, boxing up Alexandria's finest knowledge, as if wisdom were a perishable fruit. Octavian's armada creeps westward, so Cleopatra has decreed that her library will sail faster than any rumor. Scrolls first, scholars optional. You knot twine around a crate labeled Aristotle Assorted Rantings, then sleaze hard enough to scatter Aristotle philosophy across the storeroom like philosophical confetti. Somewhere above, masons hammer shutters onto marble windows. Nothing reinforces intellectual prestige like plywood in a war zone. Outside, the royal docks moan under the weight of hurried ambition. Galleys bristle with fresh-cut masts, and sailors whose morale depends entirely on whether tonight's ration will include raisins. You navigate a maze of amphorae, sidestepping one that leaks olive oil onto the planks and turns every deckhand into a slapstick routine. A quartermaster curses, skating past on his sandals, arms pinwheeling. Cleopatra's latest edict echoes from the quay. If it burns, crate it. If it floats, bribe it. Your own assignment is simple. Escort 20 crates of volatile scrolls, dried, fragile, and famously flammable, to the flagship. The librarian claims papyrus ignites quicker than gossip, so you dub the cargo floating popcorn. Black humor sticks better than resin, and the sailors adopt the nickname instantly. "Make way for the popcorn," they shout, as if you're carrying carnival treats instead of 3 centuries of human thought. At the gangway, a Roman defector named Lucullus checks manifests. He smells of cheap revolt and pricier perfume. His sandals still bear the imprint of an eagle he insists was symbolic, not loyal. He eyes the papyrus crates, then smirks. Planning to beat Octavian with bedtime stories? You reply that nothing terrifies a general like footnotes. He barks a laugh, stamps the manifest, waves you aboard. The deck is a battlefield of logistics. Oarsmen test benches. Carpenters patch seams with pitch that bubbles like tar-flavored porridge, and a priest of Horus recites blessings while nervously avoiding every bucket of nails. In the stern, Cleopatra and Antony argue over maps. She traces wind patterns with a coal-lined fingernail. He counters by slamming a dagger through Octavian's face on a painted chart. Compromise arrives when she replaces the dagger with a ruby pin. Bloodless, but sharper in implication. You stack crates beside a ballista, watching sparks leap from the smithy, where iron arrowheads glow like tiny comets. The librarian clutches his chest at each spark, certain the entire deck will detonate into scholastic fireworks. To calm him, you promise to keep a bucket of brine handy. He demands 2. 1 for the fire, 1 for his imminent heart attack. You fetch both, noticing the water is greener than politics. Evening bruises the sky. Antony announces a final shore leave. Half the crew stampedes to taverns, the other half to fortune tellers. You escort Cleopatra back to the palace for a last inspection tour. Along the way, she dictates proclamations, temple donations, wage bonuses, a new tax on pessimism, payable in silence. You jot notes, wondering how the accountants will audit mute tributes. In the hall of columns, crates of jewelry lie open like dragon hoards mid-audit. Cleopatra selects a serpent-headed diadem, fits it over her braided hair, and asks if it evokes terror or merely envy. You suggest both. She approves. Then she picks up a tiny glass vial. Shall we pack the poisons? She asks, almost playful. You recall rumors that Octavian spies are scouring the city for telltale toxins. You answer diplomatically. Poisons travel light. Their weight is in consequence, not volume. She pockets the vial with a wink that feels like a knife tucked into a compliment. Back in the nursery, Caesarion babbles at wooden soldiers. Cleopatra kisses his forehead, murmurs that the boy must learn tides before treaties. You hold a lamp while she signs guardianship papers, in case the tides turn poorly. The wax seal bears a trotting hippocampus, half horse, half fish, entirely unbothered by imperial succession. Midnight on the docks again. Torches turn rigging into spider webs of light. The last scroll crate thuds into the hold beside amphorae of pitch. You mentally label that corner Tinderbox Deluxe. The captain thanks you for the warning and orders a sailor to stash fresh water between them. Ironic safety by proximity. A sudden hush drifts across the fleet. You follow every gaze to the sea's dark edge, where a line of lanterns appears. Antony's orchestra ships, each prow carved into leering masks, mouths aglow with flames. Drums throb across the water, low and ominous. Cleopatra steps onto the quarterdeck, robes snapping in the breeze, hair crowned by that serpent diadem now catching torchlight. She raises a hand. The music halts mid-boom, leaving the night startled by its own silence. She speaks, voice steady enough to anchor continents. Tomorrow we sail not for war alone, but for the memory of what we have been and the rumor of what we might yet be. If Rome calls us traitors, let the Nile call us children. If the gods call us arrogant, let history call us necessary. The crew erupts in cheers that rattle nail buckets and probably a few stars. You clap until your palms sting, half from loyalty, half from fear of not clapping. Antony bounds up, sloshing wine from a ceremonial goblet. He toasts to victory, to love, to whichever comes first, then spills half the contents over the rail as libation. A dolphin surfaces, startled, then dives. You wonder if even sea mammals are tired of these speeches. Just before dawn, you steal an hour of sleep in a coil of rope that smells like tar and second thoughts. Dreams tangle with the creak of hulls and the rustle of papyrus. Scrolls whispering Latin insults into Greek metaphors. You wake to trumpets and gulls dueling overhead. Sailcloth unfurls with a slap like the opening page of a heavy book. As anchors rise, you position yourself near the popcorn crates, bucket of brine at the ready. The librarian appears, thrusts a fresh quill behind your ear for luck. You ask if scribes believe ink charms ward off arrows. He replies, in a good story, yes. The fleet pivots toward open water. Alexandria recedes, white and gold, under a sky sharpening to blue steel. Smoke from morning hearths coils above the lighthouse, signaling a city exhaling its scholars and soldiers in the same breath. Octavian waits somewhere beyond the horizon, cataloging thunder. You tighten the rope at your waist, feel papyrus crackle inside the hold, and decide that if the world must end in flames, it may as well be footnoted. You wake to a boom that rattles dust from the rafters, catapults testing their throats outside the eastern wall. Thank you. Alexandria has not yet fallen, but it coughs like an old smoker. Each tremor a reminder that Octavian's legions are close enough to critique the architecture. In the corridor, panicked scribes shuffle parchments that may soon serve better as tinder. A eunuch shoos you toward the throne room with a whisper. The queen requires a handler for something cold-blooded and dramatic. You hope it is a metaphor, but hope downs tools in wartime. The throne room smells of cedar, sweat, and final acts. Cleopatra stands beside a bronze brazier, her serpent diadem traded for a plain linen scarf. The kind of fashion choice kingdoms notice. On a low table rests a wicker basket, no larger than a bread loaf, its lid tied with scarlet ribbon. The ribbon twitches. Our future negotiations may be brief, she says, eyes glass bright. I need this performer calm and obedient. You swallow. Performer is a polite word for cobra. She hands you a charmer's pipe carved from sycamore. You have never charmed anything except dust bunnies, but you nod because refusing work during a siege is a career-limiting gesture. Cleopatra explains. Octavian's envoys demand proof she will surrender alive. Alive is negotiable. She intends to make them question the warranty. Your job? Accustom the snake to mesh baskets, silk sleeves, gentle darkness. Think of it as rehearsal for tragedy, she says, voice as soft as the basket's straw. Outside, the palace prepares for starvation with the efficiency of a feast. Inventories triple-checked, wells swept, every fig counted like military rations. You carry the basket to a disused atrium, once a sunlit study, now gloomed by boarded windows. You set it down, loosen the ribbon, and lift the lid a cautious finger's width. Two golden eyes glare like cursed coins. The cobra's hood flares, a parchment fan painted in inked blot warnings. You raise the pipe, blow a note that wobbles like a drunk step. The snake hesitates, perhaps out of amusement, perhaps deciding whether to bite the noise or the idiot producing it. Hours stretch, measured by your shaky melody and the distant grunt of siege engines. Sweat dampens your tunic until it clings like betrayal. Slowly, the cobra grows less interested in striking. It sways, fascinated or bored, you cannot tell. You imagine Octavian, meticulous as a bookkeeper, planning an entrance that ends all libraries. The thought puts extra quaver in your tune. At dusk, a herald arrives bearing a scroll sealed with a wolf mark. Octavian offers leniency if Cleopatra disbands her fleet, delivers Antony, and sends Caesarion to Rome for education. The herald pronounces education the Roman way, chains with conjugations. Cleopatra's reply is a single laugh that slices air. She dictates a counter-message. Egypt does not export its sunrise. You pen it, shaking ink across the papyrus like black hail. Night falls crimson behind smoke. Antony storms in, armor dented, sword nicked, smelling of fear disguised as wine. He hurls a helmet that ricochets off a pillar and bursts an oil lamp, sending flames skittering across floor mosaics. You stamp them out with sand while he roars about treachery, destiny, and how he once routed a cavalry with an empty wineskin. Cleopatra listens, patient as granite, then instructs him to defend the western gate or drink himself silent away from witnesses. He chooses the gate, then drinks on the way. You return to the atrium. The cobra now lies coiled, tongue tasting candle smoke. You practice slipping your arm beneath its belly, lifting like delicate laundry. Its scales glide over your skin, cool, deliberate. You place it into a larger silk bag. Tie a gold cord. Whisper a promise that its role is brief, yet immortal. The snake blinks, unimpressed by theater. Just before dawn, Octavian's siege towers roll forward. The city walls answer with ballista stones that roar overhead like wingless meteors. You escort Cleopatra through a warren of servants' passages toward her private mausoleum, newly stocked with food, water, and enough tapestries to soften echoes of history. Antony is reported wounded, possibly captured, definitely cursing. Cleopatra pauses at a window slit to watch the harbor. Her fleet smolders, masts snapped, sails charred. Ships burn faster than loyalties, she murmurs. Inside the mausoleum, niches hold reliquaries and small idols. She orders them draped. No gods invited to this audience. She takes the silk bag from your hands, weighing the cobra as though it were a diplomatic seal. You have done well, she says. A quiet weapon is the most polite. She gestures to an ornate chest. Fill that with my crown jewels and enough gold to bribe a small legion should the boy need bargaining chips. The boy, Caesarion, now hidden on the road to Upper Egypt, escorted my tutors who wield scrolls like shields. You load the chest under torchlight. Rubies clink like censers. Outside, shouting intensifies. Octavian's standard appears on the gate tower, an eagle shadow against flame. Cleopatra opens a lacquer box, withdraws a slender silver pin tipped with a tear of opal. Backup plan, she says, sliding it into her braided hair. A thud shakes the mausoleum. Dust drizzles from the ceiling. The door bars groan. Cleopatra dismisses all but you. She produces parchment, dips a quill in lime, and writes a final letter to Octavian. Polite surrender terms that omit any mention of reptilian variables. Deliver this when he arrives, she instructs. And when he asks about my whereabouts, guide him here. Slowly, your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. What of me, Majesty? She studies you, a sculptor deciding how much marble to spare. History needs witnesses, she says. Survive. Tell the truth prettily, and the lies will kneel. She presses a gold ring into your palm, her falcon seal still warm from her skin. Hawk's eyes see beyond smoke. You bow until your spine aches, then retreat through corridors jittering with torches. Behind you, the bronze doors of the mausoleum close with a note like final punctuation. You sprint across courtyards, strewn with broken shields and rose petals crushed under boot heels. At the main hall, you collide with Octavian's vanguard. Polished armor, efficient eyes that regard you as paperwork. You extend the scroll with trembling poise. A message from the Queen of Egypt, you declare. Protocol slows even conquerors. They accept the letter, dispatch a tribune to accompany you back. Each step toward the mausoleum feels like walking a sentence to its period. You stall by pointing out structural marvels, vaulted arches, lotus leaf capitals, the acoustics under which Orpheus could whisper. The tribune is less interested in architecture than in endings. He prods you forward. At her feet lies the empty silk bag. The snake is nowhere, or everywhere, depending on whether it has already done its work. The silver pin gleams on her hair, untouched. Her breathing is shallow, each rise of her chest a page corner turning slower, slower. Octavian's tribune steps forward, sword half drawn, then freezes. Respect, fear, or admiration, you cannot tell. Cleopatra regards him with the serenity of an answered riddle. Rome, she whispers, arrives fashionably late. Her gaze flicks to you. The falcon seal burns against your palm. Reminder and command. The tribune calls for physicians, but Cleopatra lifts a hand, palm out, commanding silence one last time. She addresses you in a voice thin as reed music. Tell the boy the sun sets, only to rehearse its entrance. You nod, tears daring to form salt water in a city already drowning. She closes her eyes. Moments later, her chest stills. The mausoleum seems to exhale. Torches gutter as if ashamed to outlive her. Somewhere within the folds of the divan, a quiet rustle hints the cobra has withdrawn to its own legend. Octavian's men mutter prayers to gods, foreign and local. You step back, heart hammering ink on memory's parchment. Understanding that witnesses must learn to write with bloodless pens. Outside, dawn edges through smoke, staining the sky the color of tarnished gold. Octavian will claim victory. Poets will edit motives, and rivals will argue over whose dagger mattered most. But you carry a ring warm with the last pulse of a queen, and a story coiled like a serpent, waiting for the right moment to strike the ears of history. You walk away from the mausoleum, feet echoing on marble, pulse echoing on eternity. Behind you, Rome inherits ashes. Ahead, the road curves toward Upper Egypt, where a boy studies tides. In your pocket, the falcon sleeps, patient as justice, sharp as memory. You quit Alexandria 2 dawns after the mausoleum doors shut, slipping south with a linen merchant caravan that treats history like spoiled cargo, best smuggled after sunset. The city's towers fade into a blur of smoke and self-importance. Every hoofbeat behind you sounds like a Senate vote arriving late. Your rented camel dislikes everything about you, especially the lingering scent of incense and frightened cobra, and voices its opinion in bubbling gargles that might once have been poetry. Sunset paints the desert crimson. You and the camel match each other, sigh for sigh. The falcon ring sweats inside your satchel, a lump of molten memory knocking your ribs. At a reed-banked hamlet, the donkey traders gossip that Octavian has christened Caesarion excess baggage. You overpay for donkey milk and underpay for silence, learning that both curdle overnight. Past midnight, you reach a cluster of mud huts where a single lamp burns like a shy conspiracy. Caesarion steps outside wearing a tunic 2 sizes too large and an expression 2 years too solemn. You kneel, press Cleopatra's ring into his small, calloused palm, and repeat her last sentence, lingering on the pause between sun and sets. He nods without a tear, the way marble nods to chisels, resigned and still indignant. Inside, a tutor unrolls a map sticky with spilled resin. Escape routes bloom like bruises. Nubian cataracts, Arab spice lanes, Indian Ocean ports where Rome's writ arrives slower than gossip. The Red Sea, you decide, because water forgets footprints. A Nubian guard counts your coin and your courage, finds the first weightier than the second, and agrees to guide you to Berenice, provided no one mentions snakes. Your camel resigns their koptos. You trade it for a donkey that looks as if it retired from prophetic visions decades ago. Geometry scrolls become cook fire kindling. Scholars need dinner more than angles. Caesarion practices writing new names on shards of broken pottery. First Ammon, then Helios, then nobody at all. You correct his spelling, but not his strategy. On the fourth night, Roman scouts flicker past like ignoble meteors. You and the boy drop into a dry cistern carved with scorpion graffiti. Pebbles skitter overhead. Hoofbeats echo Senate marble. If discovered, you plan to claim the boy is a shrine singer. Octavian crucifies sopranos less often than heirs. It is a bad plan, but desperation edits ruthlessly. Dawn finds you alive and coated in dust that tastes faintly of papyrus ash. Caesarion laughs, a bird landing on a sword, and you realize empires fear that sound more than spear points. Gentle resilience refuses to die noisily. Days flatten into parchment. You barter a cure for scorpion stings. Step 1. Avoid scorpions for bread. Berenice, you glimpse Roman standards and pivot inland onto elephant trails, where maps surrender and the sky forgets its own latitude. Beneath thorny acacias, you teach the boy the snake charmer melody. He adds an irreverent trill that would make cobras blush. One night, a scroll of Aristotle works loose from your satchel. Virtue as the mean between extremes, and rolls into a dung fire. You watch unsurprised as virtue smokes like any other theory. Monsoon winds slam. He polishes their stolen helms until reflections stare back with unfamiliar. The smugglers pay you in salted fish and a woman's robe dyed Tyrian purple, garment of queens or sailors in drag, depending on the tie-off. You stash it away. Color is a future you are not ready to wear. South of Myos Hormos, you hire pasture on a battered dhow whose captain claims to fear no god except late fees. He mans the tiller with one hand and a love charm with the other. The charm is older than he is. Both smell of wet rope and misplaced promises. Nights on deck feel like sleeping inside a copper kettle. Stars clang overhead, and every creak sounds like your own skeleton complaining. Weeks later, at an anonymous port where frankincense is weighed against regrets, the captain accepts your last coin and a riddle as payment. What travels farther, rumor or smoke? He bets smoke. You walk away owing him nothing because rumor left yesterday. Across rugged highlands, you and Caesarion join a caravan of Parthian traders who swear loyalty to whichever empire buys the next round. They covet the falcon ring. You barter instead an anecdote about Roman plumbing for a sack of figs. Stories you discover purchase sustenance when currency carries a bounty. Seasons tilt. Caesarean's voice deepens. His stride lengthens. He no longer trips over his ale. One dawn, on a sandstone ridge, he declares he will keep the ring, but forge a life too small for prophecies to aim at. You feel the universe nod. Anonymity outlives crowns. You pass him Cleopatra's silver milk ladle. Absurd, sentimental, and the sycamore pipe once meant for cobras. For summoning winds, you tease. He tests a note. It twirls into sunrise, a ribbon of maybe. Then he follows traders east toward incense valleys, leaving footprints that refuse to look back. Alone, you pivot north, toward cities hungry for bedtime stories. Sand whistles around your ankles like applause from ghosts.